welcome back to our next segment reading of the Asatru Edda. I am Asgard Skeg, and in today's chapter, it is entitled Hrungnir. And Hrungnir is a giant, a Jotun, resident of Jotunheimer, and as we find in many of the stories involving the giants, Thor, champion of Asgard and protector of Midgard, makes an appearance. Once, when Thor had gone into the east to fight trolls, Odin rode Sleipnir into Jotunheimer and came to a Jotun named Hrungnir. Hrungnir asked who it was that wore a golden helmet and rode through the sky and over the sea as on such a fine horse. Odin said that he would wager his head that no horse in Jotunheimer was its equal. Hrungnir answered that Sleipnir was a good horse, but let on that he himself had a horse that took far bigger strides, and this horse is named Golfexi. Losing his temper, Hrungnir jumped onto his horse and raced after Odin, hoping to repay him for his bragging. Odin galloped so fast that he stayed ahead of the Jotun, always just over the hill. But Hrungnir was in such a Jotun fury that he passed through the gate of Asgardr before he realized it. When he arrived at the hall doors, the Aesir invited him to drink. Walking into the hall, he demanded the drink. Then Thor's usual drinking vessels were brought out, and Hrungnir drained them all. The greatest mead horns in Valhall are placed before Thor. Then Hrungnir became drunk. There was no end to his boasting. He said he would lift up Valhall and take it to Jotunheimer, bury Asgardr, and kill all of the Godin except Freyja and Sif, who he wanted to take home with him. When Freyja went to serve him, he vowed that he would drink all of the Aesir's ale. When the Aesir grew tired of Hrungnir's boasting, they called on Thor, who quickly entered the hall, his hammer raised in the air. Enraged, he asked who had allowed the cunning Jotun to drink there. Who had granted Hrungnir permission to be in Valhall? And why should Freyja be serving him as though he were feasting among the Aesir? Then Hrungnir answered, his eyes showing no friendship for Thor. He said that Odin had invited him to drink and that he was there on Odin's safe conduct. Thor said that he would regret the invitation before he left. Hrungnir replied to Asatru that there was little renown in killing him weaponless, but Thor would find it a greater test of courage if he dared to fight him on the border of Grotagardr. It was very foolish of me, said Hrungnir, that I left my shield and whetstone at home. If I had my weapons here, we would now be testing each other in a duel. But as matters stand, however, I lay on you a charge of cowardly betrayal if you choose to kill me when I am weaponless. Thor wanted on no account to miss the opportunity to take part in a duel because no one had ever challenged him before. Hrungnir now went back the way he had come, galloping as fast as he could until he reached Jotunheimer. Then, among the Jotnar, his trip became famous, not least because a contest had been arranged between him and Thor. The Jotnar felt that there was as much at stake in who would gain the victory, for it seemed to them that they would have little hope against Thor if Hrungnir was killed, since he was their strongest. The Jotnar then fashioned a man from clay at Grotagardr. He was 9 leagues high and 3 leagues wide under the arms. They could not find a heart that was suitably large for him until they took one from a mare, but his heart became unsteady as soon as Thor arrived. Hrungnir had a heart that was famous. It was made of hard stone with three sharp pointed corners, just like the carved symbol called Hrungnishjata. His head was also made of stone, as was his shield, which was wide and thick. Holding his shield in front of him, he stood waiting at Grotagardr for Thor. He had a whetstone for a weapon, and it rested readily on his shoulder. He was not a welcoming sight. Standing terrified at Hrungnir's side was the clay Jotun called Mokurkalfi. It is said that on seeing Thor, he wet himself. Thor, accompanied by Thjalfi, went to the dueling ground. Thjalfi ran ahead to where Hrungnir stood and said to him, "You stand unprepared, Jotun, holding your shield in front of you. Thor has seen you. He is traveling underneath the earth and will come at you from below." Hrungnir then shoved his shield under his feet and stood on top of it, grasping the whetstone with both hands. He saw flashes of lightning and heard enormous claps of thunder. The terror of Jotnar, Thor, made a visit to the mound of Gorotan. The son of Jordfrigga, Thor, drove to the game of battle, and Mani's path thundered beneath him. Wrath swelled in Mili Baldur's brother, Thor. All the hawks' sanctuaries found themselves burning under because of Ullr's stepfather Thor. And the ground all low was battered with hail when the goats drew the temple power of the easy chariot forward to encounter with Hrungnir. Svornir, Odin's widow, practically split apart. Baldur's brother did not spare there the greedy enemy of men. Mountains shook and rocks smashed. Heavens burned above. I have heard that the watcher of the dark bone of the land of Haki's carriages moved violently in opposition when he saw their warlike slayer. Hrungnir saw Thor in his divine rage. Swiftly flew the pale ring ice beneath the soles of the rock garter. The bonds caused this, the ladies of the fray wished it. The rock gentleman did not have to wait long after for that of a swift blow from the tough multitude smashing friend of hammer-faced troll. Thor was rushing towards Hrungnir, but when still at a long distance away, he raised his hammer and threw it at Hrungnir. The Jotun, using both hands, lifted his whetstone and threw it towards Thor. The whetstone struck the hammer in mid-flight and broke it in two. One part fell to the earth, and from it came all whetstones. The other part pierced Thor's head so that he fell to the earth, and the hard fragment of the whetstone of the visitor of the women of Vignar's people whizzed at the ground's son in his brain ridge, so that the steel pumice still stuck in Odin's boy's skull stood there spattered with Einderthi Thor's blood. But the hammer Mjolnir landed right in the middle of Hrungnir's head. It smashed his skull into pieces, and he fell forward, landing on top of Thor, with his legs lying across Thor's neck. The life spoiler of Beli's Bali troops made the bear of the noisy storm's secret refuge fall on the shield islet. There stand down the gully land prince before the tough hammer of the rock donner breaker, forced back the mighty defiant one. Meanwhile, Thjalfi attacked Mokurkafi, who fell in such a way that it is hardly worthy of story. Raskva's brother, Thjalfi, stood enraged. Mani's father, Thor, had struck a vicious blow. Neither Thor nor Thjalfi's power stone shakes with terror. Thjalfi then went to Thor, intending to lift Hrungnir's legs off him, but he could not move it. When he learned that Thor had fallen, all the Aesir came and tried to lift the leg, but they could not budge it. Then Magni, son of Thor and Jarnsaxa, arrived. He was 3 winters old at the time. He flung Hrungnir's leg off Thor and said, "It is a great shame, father, that I come so late. I imagine that I would have killed this Jotun with my fist, had I met him." Thor stood up and, greeting his son warmly, declared that he would become powerful. And he said, "I want to give you the horse Gullfaxi, which Hrungnir had owned." Then Odin spoke. He said that Thor was wrong to give so fine a horse to the son of a Gigr instead of Thor's own father. Thor then returned home to Thrudvangur, and the whetstone remained stuck in his head. When the seeress called Groa arrived, the wife of Arvandil the Bold, otherwise known as Egil, Olgulfjon Groa, began to enchant Red Booster of being Russ Blade from the inclined slopes of the wound-giving god's hair. She sung her spells over Thor until the whetstone began to loosen. When Thor felt that, he expected the whetstone would soon be removed. Wanting to please and reward Groa for her healing, he told the story of his return from the north and how he had waded across the river Ileivagar, carrying Arvandil Egil's southwards from Jotunheimer on his back in a basket. He recounted that one of Arvandil Egil's toes had stuck out of the basket and had frozen. Thor broke it off and threw it up into the heavens as a token, making from it the star called Arvandilsta. Thor added that it would not be long before Arvandil Egil returned home. Then Groa became so happy that she couldn't remember any of her magic, and the whetstone got no looser but remained lodged in Thor's head. And it is offered as a warning that one should not throw a whetstone across the floor, because then the whetstone in Thor's head moves. Thank you for joining us on this next segment reading the Asatru Edda. I hope you enjoyed the reading. Please support the channel, hit that thumbs up button, and subscribe for all new content. Thank you again for listening in, and we'll see you on the next segment.